Thanks for clicking on this video. If you've seen any of my others, you'll know my production quality when I'm speaking is relatively low, so bear with me. But I still think this information will be useful. What I wanted to talk about today was when you are out in the woods and backpacking, making miles, how should you handle your food situation? What are the goals and how do you make it happen? Well, obviously, the most important thing is to make sure that you can actually have enough calories to expend the energy that you're going to. But from there, there's a lot of questions about how you're going to carry it, what types of foods they should be, how much should all the food weigh, where will you get more food after a certain point in time, how will you store the food overnight, how will you cook what you need to cook or not. A lot of these things are controversial topics, and I say that with air quotes, but this is just my opinion on how you could do it, and it's something that's successful for me. So the first thing that I would do is establish what my calorie needs are. If you are someone who's ever tried to lose weight, or if you are on some type of workout program, you'll know how to go and calculate your calorie needs. If you don't do that, or if you never have and you've never bothered, you could look up something like a TDEE calculator. And that stands for Total Daily Energy Expenditure, I believe. And essentially what it is it's looking at some different formulas that have been developed over time. And they take into account your height, your weight, and your activity level to come up with an estimate for how many calories you burn at that activity level. Well, that's a great place to start. And so for me, that might be around 3,000 calories a day. Now, if I'm making a 20 or 25 or 30 mile day backpacking, you can be sure that number is a lot higher. But right off the bat, you get into a situation when you're backpacking where you can kind of chase your tail. The more you move, the more calories you burn, the more you'd have to carry. Well, the more you'd have to carry, the heavier it is, and the less miles you can make. So there's kind of an optimum in there. And for me, what I've found is that if I'm pushing big miles, I actually don't want a ton of calories. I may get hungry, I'll get hiker hunger or something like that, but I may even shoot for a little bit less than that 3,000 number, maybe 2,800 or so, at least in the beginning. That keeps the weight low and my effort relative to that low. I've made the mistake before of trying to carry 4,000 and 5,000 calories per day, even if it was in a very weight efficient format like high fat foods, and it really didn't serve. It was not good, and I had to, make a pit stop where I could get to a trash can and basically offload things. And I don't know why that is. I think with, at least for me personally, with high output, the body is probably in some sort of heightened state where food is important, but it doesn't. Something about appetite and maybe fight or flight, hormones moving. A lot of that just doesn't come into play like it would sitting at home. So starting out there, I have a basis. How many calories do I need? Maybe 2,800 or 3,000. The next choice is to figure out what am I going to fill those calories with? And that's where you get into macronutrients. You're talking about the total calories being broken down into carbohydrates, fat, protein, fiber, which is, I guess you could say it's a macronutrient, although it has no caloric value. I'm not really trying to debate that it does or doesn't, but just that it's an important number to take into account. Why? Well, you can fill all of those 2,800 or 3,000 calories with olive oil or butter, but you're going to end your hike really fast because you'll end up with diarrhea or something. It's going to be bad. So even though that's the most space or weight efficient way to have your food, it's not actually going to serve the purpose. So I have a little asterisk or disclaimer there about fiber, which just kind of helps keep yourself regular, keep yourself happy. You don't want to be constipated, and you don't want to have diarrhea either. Those are, we kind of laugh, right? But those are actually pretty serious and annoying things if you've ever had to deal with them. Diarrhea in particular could be life-threatening because of how rapidly it can dehydrate you. So, carbohydrates, fat, and protein. Well, a gram of fat is worth 9 calories, and a gram of protein and carbohydrates is worth 4 calories. So, most of us know by now that fat is your most energy dense nutrient. But like we said, you don't want to fill everything up on the fat side of the bucket. So you want some carbohydrates and you want some protein. And for me personally, I do weight training and I don't want to lose a bunch of muscle mass just because I'm on trail. But also, protein is extremely important for regenerating yourself after each day of hiking. I think if you hike long enough, you're gonna just diminish. It's one of those types of activities, but you want to give yourself the best chance you can to recuperate day after day. So maximizing protein within reasonable limits is also important. And then taking all these things into account, you want to say to yourself, well, what are some foods that I actually want to eat? Because if you're on a multi-day trek, it's important to keep your appetite up, your desire for food up. Some people will say, well, hunger is, the best spice. Well, that's true, but probably within limits. If you were eating some sort of survival ration every single day, maybe you'd be hungry enough to eat it, but at that point, are you even enjoying your hike or your days? I mean, there's an important psychological factor there. So what I personally try to do is hit my calories and a good macronutrient spread, provided by foods that actually taste good and that I enjoy, at least in this physical environment. It's not something I would eat every day at home. So once we know that, we can start saying physically, what things am I going to eat? I'll link a sample menu that works well for me. But right now, I'll just read it off. So during the day, I won't really wake up and eat breakfast on a big hike. I like to pack up and get going. And so most of the food that I'm eating during the day is kind of in a snack or a bar form. So I'll have something like, here on this menu, an RX nut butter, a Lara bar, or Lera bar, I don't know, a Pro bar. Those tend to form the basis of some good morning and midday energy. And I'll actually carry 2 of those per day. Then at some point, if I'm hitting a big incline or something like that, and I do need a quick boost of carbohydrate energy, I might use something like a honey stinger or candied pineapple, basically anything that's carbohydrate, sugar. Also during the day, I'll have something like beef jerky, cashews, and then I also like to have some type of cracker or chip, something like Pringles, Cheez-Its, veggie straws, anything that's kind of salty and appetizing. And well, at home it would be considered junk food because you want to eat too much of it. On trail, that's a good thing to get those calories in. And those are also calorie dense foods. So I'll go through the whole day eating a variety of these snacks. I'll have a big bag of them, and I'll pick out whatever looks good. And then after I've made the most of my hiking for the day, whether I'm eating in camp or before camp, I'll have something that is nutritionally very important, but also psychologically important. So that's where something like a freeze-dried meal comes into play. This is chicken pesto pasta by Peak Refuel. They have a lot of good entrees, and so does Backpacker Pantry. The thing about these, though, is that they are very high in protein. They also have a lot of fat in them. Overall, this package is close to 1,000 calories, and all you have to do is boil some water and put that and rehydrate, and you have a very psychologically or emotionally beneficial meal. That is something that I like to keep in. Others may do something like a no cook, or they'll just rehydrate a meal that's cold. Um, that's never appealed to me, although I know there are weight savings to be had. So if I make this type of a daily menu, what do I end up with? I get something like, again, I'll put this up. In this case, this menu actually had about 3,300 calories, 179 grams of fat, 120 grams of protein. That's a good number. 294 net carbohydrates, because there's 25 grams of fiber. So 25 grams of fiber may be a little low for whatever dietary recommended values are, but honestly, as far as going on trail, that's a pretty good amount for the types of foods that an average person might want to bring and eat day after day. You're getting some good fiber, and it doesn't mean that you won't necessarily still have some gastric distress from high activity or maybe elevation or anything like that, but you are keeping yourself pretty regular and pretty satisfied, and that's really important so that you can meet your objective. I don't think anybody wants to plan a big hike, go through all the trouble of getting the gear, getting the food, making all the plans, traveling to the trailhead, and then having to quit because you don't have energy, you can't recuperate, or you have some type of serious gastric distress. So I've put a lot of thought into the foods that I bring over time. I've also experimented with other things, but I like these. So that's how I fill it out. But what are some other important pieces of information here? Well, you'll notice all these foods are efficiently packed. For example, this nut butter is a very thin packet and a very handy shape. Same thing with the Lara bar, the Pro bar, and so on. If you had Pringles or Cheez-Its, well, you take them out of the package and you put them in a big Ziploc bag. And if you really need to, you can smash them up and they'll become even more efficient for space, and you can just open the bag and dump the crumbs in. And it might sound silly or it might sound unappetizing, but truly it doesn't matter at that point on the trail. There are some other foods that I might bring, like I may have a backpacker's pantry dessert or a peak refuel. I do not use these bags on trail. They are very durable, obviously, because these are intended to have a long shelf life and be sealed from the environment. And that's great for when you keep them in the basement and all that. But when it's time to get on trail, what I'll do is I'll take the contents out of the bag and put it into either a pint or a quart size freezer Ziploc bag. Those are the freezer style, which are safe from boiling water. Is there leaching? I don't know, but they're not going to melt as compared to the sandwich or snack style bags. It's a heavy duty plastic. So I put the contents in the bag, and then you end up with something that's very compact, and you save a bunch of weight and space for the packaging. Once you're done with those meals, by the way, you eat all the food out of it, and you can press the air out, zip the bag and roll it up, and you just have a small little piece of trash. And that's the other thing. All of these packages, what they leave behind is very small. And so that's how I choose those types of foods. Certain things I can't repackage, like a liquid IV. Whether or not the actual package is efficient or not, that's just kind of what I have to roll with, because it's already portioned, and that's pretty important. So that brings me to my next topic, which is things that are not exactly food, but are important. Liquid IV or any type of hydration powder like that is very important. If you're outputting a high amount of energy, your body is transporting a ton of things to your muscles in and out, and you are going to go through salt and all the other types of salts, potassium, magnesium, etc., for all this energy, you're going to go through those way faster than you normally would. And so what you really don't want to do is get to a point in the day where you have cramps or shakes or just plain lethargy. Not necessarily because you don't have enough calories, but because your muscles don't have the transport uh, chemicals that they need to do what they need to do. So on a high output activity, I might plan to have 2 packets per day of liquid IV, and then maybe 1 or 2 extra overall on top of that. And I'll just dump these right into my water bottle and drink it throughout the day. So that's a non-food item. It has a few calories in it though. Another thing is freeze-dried coffee. That's not a food item, but that's another morale boost. Honestly, the weight cost for having no calories is very minimal. I mean, these are few grams per serving, and it makes a big difference in your day. Speaking of, let's have some more coffee. So, what do I do during the day with all this food? Well, if I'm in a situation, actually, I would say I basically always do this, which is I will use a bag like this. This is called, I believe, Odor No. I believe it's Odor-No. It's an Odor No bag. And what it is, it's just a bag that looks a lot like a trash bag. And what I will do, is I'll put all of my food in there during the day, and then I'll seal it up with this clip. And that rides in a good spot in my pack. It's usually one of the heaviest single items that's in my pack, so I like to keep that one somewhere in the middle and somewhere towards my actual back. That way, I don't get food odors or crumbs or especially anything leaking from trash, like a little extra sauce out of the pasta or something like that. That stays really well contained inside the bag. And because it's an odor-proof bag, or at least heavily minimizing the odors, those things don't transfer to my clothing, which is obviously great from an animal safety perspective. And you just don't want all that junk on all the rest of your good backpacking clothing or anything else. So throughout the day, I might grab a couple things, snacks, put those in my hip pocket so I can get to them easily, and then keep the bulk of my food in the bag and get anything out if I need to. Then at the end of the day, when it comes time to store the food, I'll take it out of the plastic bag or leave it in there depending if it can fit in one fell swoop. And I'll put all that in either the bag that I'm hanging from a tree or my hard-sided bear canister. So that way, all the food and smellables are there for safekeeping. And then the next morning, kind of repeat the process. I'll take the bag out, get a few snacks for the road, put the bag in my pack. And then if I'm using this hanging bag, this is really easy just to roll up and put in a pocket somewhere. If I'm using the bear canister, it'll be empty, of course, and that will actually ride on the top of my pack. The Ultralight Mountain Gear Southwest has a sort of a Y strap that goes over top. So that might sound cumbersome, but it's actually not, because even this largest canister is a little over a kilo, a little over 2 pounds. And because it's sitting on top of the pack, it's pretty much right in line with the center of gravity of everything else. So works great. I don't bother trying to shove this inside the pack and work with that, because it's simply too rigid. And a lot of the way that I pack a pack has to do with being flexible and kind of making use of every little corner. So we talked about how many calories, what those calories are going to be made of, how you're going to eat them and store them, and why you'd make some of the choices you would make. Probably the last thing I would address is getting comfortable with knowing how long you can go, how long you're willing to go. For me personally, somewhere around 5 days is about the maximum. That has to do with the volume of the food and the weight. 5 days or so before I would want to have a resupply waiting for me somewhere. And that resupply box would come with all these foods. I would leave things like these meals in these packages, but I would also have mailed myself those Ziploc freezer quart bags or something like that to transfer in and leave these in the trash from wherever the resupply was. 5 days is good. What that translates into is a bag like this is getting pretty darn full. It's full all the way up, and I have a little bit left to twist it and use the clip. Anything beyond that, it's not really going to work very well. And that brings me maybe to my last point, which is that all your selections, you should keep an eye out for net weight. So for this menu that I described, with 2 nut butters, 2 Lara bars, 2 Pro bars, a honey stinger, a peak refuel meal, 2 liquid IVs, 2 ounces of beef jerky, an ounce of cashews, and 2 ounces of Cheez-Its or Pringles. Well, that comes out to about 1.56 pounds for an entire day's worth of food. That's a good number. That is, I think, over 130 calories per ounce net weight. Yes, there is packaging on top of that, but I didn't really call that out because it's variable. It depends on what you really want to buy and how you really want to store things. But for reference, that's a very good number, and that's how you can get to 1.5 pounds for all your food per day. So pretty rapidly you're reducing your consumable pack weight, but those initial days are kind of heavy, and that's even with an efficient loadout like this. So 5 days is about the max. And well, I would say I'd love to hear what other people like to eat. I know some people come out into the woods and they may want to actually cook, bring basically grocery foods and all the utensils and everything necessary. Certainly what I've laid out here is very much more in line with a combination of an ultralight type of loadout and something where you're trying to maximize miles. You're not spending a ton of time in camp. You might be coming in your sunset and having your boiling bag and then packaging everything up and getting to bed. So anyway, thank you for watching this video. I have to say it, if you liked it, please subscribe and let me know your thoughts. Thank you.